Welcome to Birken Forest Monastery's live stream. I'm Ajahn Sona, and we have an opportunity today to answer questions from around the world. Pia just read me off some of the countries that are tuning in, and there seems to be all over the planet. Wonderful. So please feel free to put any questions in the comment section. We may not get to every question, but we endeavor to answer at least some of them. And let's start, Pia.
Ajahn, our first question is from Crystal in Ontario, Canada. Ajahn Sona, how do animals accrue merit or good karma needed for rebirth in the human realm?
Well, the animal realm it's very clearly described by the Buddha that when consciousness falls into the animal realm, it's very difficult to get back up out of the animal realm. The chances of re-emerging into the human realm from the animal realm are very slim indeed. There's a famous simile of just how remote those chances are. So it is that there is a sea tortoise, and once every 100 years it comes up to breathe in the ocean. And there is a ring of wood that is randomly floating in the ocean, driven by the wind and the waves. What do you think the chances are that when that tortoise comes up to breathe, that it puts its head through the ring of wood? And of course, as you contemplate this simile, you will see that the odds are incredibly remote. And that is the odds of an animal coming back up into human existence. By the way, the simile is quite interesting. The tortoise, the turtle, has a bald head, and it goes through this ring of wood. Now that is the baby emerging from the womb. So that's the baby emerging from the womb, looks like a tortoise putting its head through a ring. So this is the remote possibility. How it works, according to the Buddha and the details which are given in the suttas, sometimes commentaries and Abhidhamma, is that basically it's preliminary merit, it's accumulated merit made before one enters the animal realm, that eventually the merit that the actions that took you into that realm, the mind states that took you into that realm, eventually are depleted. And what remains at the end of that, if there is human potential remaining at the end of that, that's the cause for the rising back into the human realm. So sometimes there's negative causes left after a period of time in a realm. Sometimes there's positive causal or potential left after a time in a realm. When the karma is exhausted, then at the end of that exhaustion of karma, whatever is left over determines the rebirth potential. I do think, though, that there are certain animals that are brought into the human company, like search and rescue dogs, or companions, animals that guide blind people around and so forth. They have great opportunity to make merit, because they do seem to have intention. They do seem to have loyalty. They are emotionally involved, and so it would seem that they would have some opportunity to create positive merit even while in the animal stage. And you can see that animals are very highly, carefully observed. In the Buddhist scriptures, you'll see attributes and characteristics of animals that were largely overlooked in the West until very, very recently. And you'll see the possibilities of animals having higher kind of motives, loyalty, compassion, etc. This is clearly observed in the 5th century BC by the Buddha and other monks, and it's told in many a story. So they had a more sympathetic and empathetic view of animals and how they thought and how their motivations were. In the West, it's been overlooked. Animals have not been appreciated until very, very recently. I would say in the last 40 years or so, there's a new awakening of understanding of the animal consciousness in the West. So it's a very interesting topic. I won't speak too much on it, but let's move on to the next question, Pia.
Ajahn, our next question is from Julian in London, UK. What is your view on paths that emphasize sudden realization and plunging straight into, quote, non-dual awareness versus paths of gradual cultivation?
Well, the first phrase that we must look at is this non-dual awareness. You won't find that phrase bandied around in the Theravada school. It is characteristic of Vedanta schools, Advaita Vedanta, Advaita meaning non-dual, and it's characteristic of some of the Mahayana Buddhist schools. It's not particularly characteristic of Theravada schools. So this term, non-dual, needs a lot of definition. It should not be presumed that anybody, the ordinary person, understands what you mean when you say non-dual. It means not two. What does it mean? What's not two? I would say that there's a misunderstanding about gradual and sudden awakening. All awakening happens suddenly, in a moment. The approach to it is gradual. So if the causes and conditions for awakening are not in place, then it cannot happen. Because primarily the universe or the structures of consciousness are not acausal. They're not random. They're causal. There's causality in the stream of consciousness. And that's expressed in this, what we call dependent origination. The Buddha shows how one thing leads to another with certain causes, then something will arise. And without that cause, it will not arise. And if that cause has been deactivated, then the next resultant in the process will not appear. So this is how the description of the Eightfold Path is. This is you're putting in the causes, which cause dependent origination to process, and you get results. But the results come in a split second. It's a glimpse, just like you have glimpsed something out of the corner of your eye, or you're on a voyage and it's dark, and you're being led along by somebody that apparently knows the way. But suddenly there's a bolt of lightning, perhaps, and the sky is illuminated, and you see for a moment the destination that you've been told about. So maybe you're going towards a mountain, and you haven't been to the mountain before. You don't know whether the mountain exists even, but you're following some guide. And then a flash of lightning illuminates the mountain, but then it goes dark again. At that moment, that's the glimpse, the first glimpse of enlightenment. That could be equivalent to stream entry. And so you see suddenly that you have been transformed into a person who's just trusting about a body of information to a person who has actually seen the evidence with their own eyes. Now, note that the simile has that it goes dark again. So the vivid image is not constant to you. It's not dawn yet. As you go farther, now there's a space of time between this glimpse and dawn. As dawn begins to break, there's a hazy pre-dawn kind of light that shows just the outline of the mountain. And now you are able to see it whenever you wish, but not in great detail. Then the next stage is, as the light gets stronger in another hour or so, then the details of the mountain are revealed. And now you can look at it and describe it in detail. And the last stage is you are at the mountain. You're on the mountain. You don't have any doubts about the mountain. You're not winding your way to the mountain anymore. So there's 4 events along the way. The glimpse, the dim visibility of it, the clear visibility of it, and then arriving on the mountain. So you can compare this to the 4 stages of the path. Each moment is sudden, but if you're not walking towards the mountain, if you're not on towards the guide, if attention is not directed to it, you won't see it. And until those causes, the causes that put you on the path towards that mountain have been fulfilled, then you won't see the mountain. So there's both a gradual process and a sudden experience involved in the path. And as I say, people read all kinds of spiritual texts. They quite often confuse them. They think it's all something sort of Eastern Taoism, Sufi dancing, whatever. It's all kind of a mishmash in your head, and a lot of talk, non-dual talk, and so forth. And so you should get straight, first of all, that schools have different articulations of these things, and it's very worthwhile learning what the language, vocabulary, and viewpoint of each of these schools are, and they're not all talking about the same thing necessarily. And so one should not presume that they are talking about the same thing. So this is important to just see, how do the Theravada describe the path and the experience, moments of insight on the path. And then you will find the answer. Yes, but a good question. Thank you for asking that.
Ajahn, our next question is from the live chat from Douglas in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Dear Ajahn, I am practicing being mindful from the moment I lay in bed to the moment my body surrenders to sleep. I am not practicing mindfulness of breath because I don't want to associate it with the wakefulness I cultivate during formal meditation. Still, I worry that mindfulness is stimulating and keeping me awake. Do you have any alternatives you would suggest? How do you practice while falling asleep?
Yeah, it's a good question. And that's what happens, especially in an intense mindfulness retreat. Often people report that they start sleeping less, and the vivid attempt to pay full attention all the time quite often will delay your capacity to go to sleep. You'll find that your mind is on automatic mindfulness, and you're closely and attentively following every movement and so forth. So this can delay the falling asleep. There are games you can play with yourself. One of the stories from Ajahn Chah was, a novice was asking him about how to practice mindfulness of breath. And Ajahn Chah said, "Which breath did you fall asleep on? The in breath or the out breath?" And then the very dedicated novice could not answer that. He said, but he paid attention for the next several months to try to be ready if Ajahn Chah asked him again, "Which breath did you fall asleep on?" So after months of observing this very, very carefully, finally the moment came, and Ajahn Chah turned towards him and said, "How's your mindfulness coming along?" "Oh, very well, sir, very well." And he prepares himself proudly to answer, because he remembers from last night that he fell asleep on the out breath. Ajahn Chah asks him, "So, which breath did you wake up on? In breath or out breath?" Again, no answer. So, these are, that's the higher end of the virtuoso game, to be able to know whether you fell asleep on the out breath or in breath, or woke up on the in breath or out breath. And definitely, I imagine that novice had problems going to sleep, actually. So if you really need your beauty rest, then I would suggest switching to loving kindness for the last 20 minutes of your day. Of course, you can maintain loving kindness all day long, but loving kindness is much more conducive to sleep. And what are the first 3 benefits given in the 11 benefits of loving kindness? The first 3 are: 1 sleeps well, 1 wakes well, 1 has no bad dreams. So loving kindness is an induction of the emotion of safety. You feel safe, and then you can release your cares for the world, your worries and concerns, and that's the primary condition for falling asleep. So that's more conducive to good sleep.
Ajahn, our next question is also from the live feed from Sud in Pennsylvania, United States. Dear Ajahn, how does one achieve breakthrough to seeing dukkha, anicca, anatta? Is it okay to fake it until you make it? Intellectually trying to see before actual realization?
Yes, indeed. Please fake it. Act, if you're not enlightened, at least act enlightened. People are always into this kind of, well, that's the way I feel. I was just mad. And so feeling that it's justified. No, actually, you're being asked to control your behavior, even if your emotions are not in conformity with that. It's not about just expressing yourself. It's a matter of, at least control your emotion, control your behavior, even if you can't control your emotions yet. So of course, we're not asking you to pretend you're enlightened. But it would be good if you could model yourself on enlightened behavior. So how would the Buddha behave? How would an enlightened person behave in such a situation? Well, if you can at least pull off the behavior, then that would be good. And then you can continue your work on making that authentic, that it comes out of an authentic feeling of freedom from the negative emotions, the negative hindrances, and so forth. So intellectually as well, we can only learn at first intellectually. We can't know the process. And this is how we learned a lot of things. We learn the idea behind them. We analyze the idea. And this is fully supported by the Buddha and the teachings to become completely fluent and familiar with the basic teachings of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path until you can explain it to yourself and possibly even explain it to others. It doesn't mean, though, that, of course, intellectual capacity to explain it means that you realize it, any more than understanding the physics of how a baseball flies through the air makes you a big league pitcher. It doesn't. There's 2 ways of understanding. One is through the intellect, and then one is through the actual emotional body. For sports and so forth, there's a knowledge that the body itself has about how to do these things, and it's not the intellectual knowledge. They're not at war with each other. They can be helpful to each other, but it's very easy to get confused and think because you understand the idea that you actually get it. But it's only when you only know that you got it when you can answer this question: how do you feel? And if you can answer, I feel free, well, then that's the right answer. So yes, please understand that it's to behave yourself and comport yourself in a dignified and enlightened fashion is good, and the realization and the understanding will follow as long as you keep inquiring and working on that process.
Ajahn, our next question is from the live feed from Sumana in Whitecourt, Alberta. An image the Buddha uses in the Metta Sutta, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, is problematic and a stumbling block for me in this beautiful reflection. I am aware of my attachment and my love as a mother. Why did the Buddha use this image, Am I twisting his intention when I feel stuck reading this?
Well, he could have used other similes, perhaps brotherly love or something, but I think the most famous and obvious one is that the mother has to attend to the child, and the child is completely helpless in the beginning, and they rely completely for survival on their mother. Quite often, especially in the 5th century BC, the fathers might be out having to raise, crops in the field or off doing something else. But the mother has to tend, and very carefully and continuously, in a very unconditional way. They express their love through actual deeds like feeding you and changing your diapers and all of this kind of stuff. So bathing you. So it's an actual expression of it. And the mother is also amazingly indifferent to the qualities of the child. So the child, some children are deformed or lacking in mental acuity or ill-behaved and messy and so forth. And the mother seems to put that aside and still have just loving kindness for them, even though they have all kinds of problems and deficits and so forth. So that's what he's after, is that the mother, it's not like you pick out the best puppy in the animal store and you take the best puppy home, the one that's smartest and looks best. The mother just has a puppy arrive and they have to just deal with that puppy and take care of it. And you see people, of course, they go to the shelters as well with the animals, and they pick out the 3-legged dog that was thrown away and take it home and care for it in an unconditional, loving way. It doesn't have to win the best of breed at the Westminster Dog Show. They love it. So that's the kind of motherly love that the Buddha is talking about. And it's quite remarkable. So, sometimes the child grows up, the boy grows up to be a murderer and so forth, and still the mother goes to visit him in the jail and sends him cookies and stuff. It's a remarkable thing. And it's it is important in the universe that unconditional loving kindness remains, because most of humanity is flawed. Most people are far from perfect, and they have these physical, mental, emotional, moral flaws, and it's quite uplifting and beautiful that despite all that, there's still concern for their well-being and happiness, and an understanding of that everybody wants to be happy, basically. It's just they don't know how to. So this is kind of the essence of that simile. It's a very beautiful simile. And in this world, you see it most acted out by mothers with children as well. Even animal mothers taking care of the cubs or their puppies or whatever it is. It's quite remarkable to see that. Okay, Pia, next question.
Our next question is from James in Minneapolis, Minnesota, United States. Could I consider you my teacher because the knowledge that I have accumulated has been solely learned from your YouTube channel?
Yes, please, you can consider me your teacher by all means. There's no copyright on me. Whatever you learned, I'm happy for you, and that's why I do it. And anybody who is welcome, and this is free any time in the world. This is the beauty of this medium, is that you can access it anytime, any place. You can keep it, record it, listen to it 1,000 times, whatever you like. And if it does you good, that is gratifying for me. That's all that matters.
Ajahn, our next question is from the live feed from No One Everyone. Dear Ajahn, how does one distinguish between repressing an unskillful action and skillfully abandoning and uprooting them for good?
Well, I don't think it's repressing an unskillful action. It's maybe repressing the the motive behind an unskillful action. It's preventing one from indulging in unskillful things. And so when we say repressing, we mean that we're holding it down. And of course, it would be better if you could could stop trouble before it starts, so that you don't feel the angry urge to shout at somebody or swear at somebody or hit somebody. You don't feel that. That's better than feeling it but not acting on it. But indeed, if you feel it and suppress or repress the urge to act on it, that's okay. That's kind of the last option, but it's a valid option. And this is something that is quite frequently misunderstood in teachings about Buddhism. They were borrowing some sort of Freudian language, and that is the fear of repression. Psychology and psychiatry often attribute all kinds of big problems that the person is repressing emotions or suppressing their emotions, and that they should get them out, etc. Buddhism tends to say that, you don't get anger out by being angry. By expressing anger and being angry does not deplete your storehouse of anger, because it's infinite. Anger arises from unwise attention to the fault. It's the way you're looking at yourself or the world that produces the anger. And until you do not look unwisely at things, you will have anger. And no matter how many times you get angry, you don't get over anger by being angry. And so there's all kinds of therapies about, hitting a pillow or shouting or something as if you're going to somehow get over your anger. Actually, you actually lay down tracks for future anger, because whatever you do, you tend to do again. So if you can prevent anger from arising ahead of time, you will tend to prevent anger from arising ahead of time in the future. If in the midst of anger you say to yourself, here I go again, can I just stop? And if you can kind of gradually bring it down, then you will in the future also have a tendency to gradually bring it down. And that will allow you to come closer to letting it go or preventing it from arising. So it's very important that we understand that the Buddhist psychology. Now, there's a couple of YouTube videos that I've made some years ago. They're on the channel about Buddhist psychology versus Western psychology. And one of those areas is that Buddhism regards anger, particularly anger and hatred, as a very, very dangerous emotion, and which should not be indulged in, should be prevented, removed, and if you have to, suppressed. And it's not damaging to suppress it. But until you have the insight and skills to understand how anger arises, you will have to, you do not want to indulge it, and you don't want to believe that somehow by merely just expressing your frustration, your anger, that somehow that gets rid of it. It's infinite in its possibilities. If you don't understand how it arises, it just will arise forever again. It's only by understanding that you remove anger. So please watch and of course I've given other talks on anger, how it arises, the danger of anger. It's that Buddhism has a different view of it than many of the ideas and therapies around in the West and psychology around it. Yes.
Ajahn, our next question is from the live chat from Sunzu2YA from Florida, United States. With actual proof that near-death experiences are real, how does Buddhism explain this occurrence? Thank you.
Yes, well, Buddhism is all about that near-death experience. There's very detailed descriptions of what happens at the moment of death. If you want very detailed descriptions down almost to the microscopic level of what happens in the mind as you approach death, you would look at Dhamma, and there you will find very precise notations about mental moments, what constitutes a single moment of thought. It has 17 parts. Did you know that? And the moment of death, which is a very strange moment because it only has 14 parts to it. So the analytical schools of Buddhism have very almost atomic level microscopic views of what happens in consciousness at the moment of death. One has to remember, though, that when the Buddha talks about death, he is talking about a voyage you're going on. He's not really talking about death as termination or cessation. He's talking about death as radical transformation. It's just a voyage into the unknown. Because from the point of view of Buddhism, the consciousness persists through the process of the death of the body, and then takes up a new realm of consciousness, and usually involving a body and mind as well. So it's just a radical travel. Here's the simile the Buddha gives us: you are to travel to a far country. What will you take with you? And of course, because you can't take your body along on the voyage to the far country. What kind of qualities of personality, what kind of positive deeds and training will you take with you? That's all you can take with you. So recollection, and so here's something interesting. You'll find a preoccupation about inquiries. You'll find all kinds of videos and stories and books about it in the West, about the afterlife. You find very little concern about the afterlife in Buddhism. You know why? This is the afterlife. This is the one after the one you just had. In Christianity, you start from nothing, apparently. There's no real explanation. And the only afterlife you can ever know about is the one after this. But from a Buddhist point of view, the inquiries into the afterlife is like, this is it. I mean, this is an afterlife. The one that you can't remember is the one before this. So this is, if you want to know about the afterlife, just here it is. This is your afterlife. Yeah. Okay, let's go on to the next question.
Ajahn, our next question is also from the live feed from Pecky Peck. How does one cope with feeling unready for monastic life, but disenchanted with much of secular life and marginalized from it?
Well, that's such a good question, because a lot of people have that issue, and more have that issue. I would say lots of people in this monastery have that issue. This is I have my great sympathies to you. And that's why we start the Upasika program. That's why we have this live stream and all of these videos available to you. And it's kind of a virtual Sangha, so you can really participate with the monastic life and yet not have it available to you. Now, opportunities for monastic life are becoming more and more common now. Before the 1970s, to become a Buddhist monk or nun as a Westerner was such a remote, very, very rare experience. But it is now much more possible. We do have monasteries and places that you can go and get trained and so forth. So we are making progress in that direction. But in the meantime, there's a lot more people than we could possibly have in our monasteries who really like to spend quite a bit of time in a monastery. And we have people living in this monastery who are lay people who haven't ordained but have been in the monastery for 5 or 10 years. And they live like monastics. They have certain, they don't have to follow all of the rules of the monastics, but they gain a lot of experience like this. Now, this is a bit of an awkward condition to be sort of 1 foot in the world and 1 foot in a monastery, or sometimes 1 foot in a monastery, the other one on a banana peel. And this is very, very, it's a little excruciating. Sorry about that. And I think other people who are listening may be having a revelation about it for themselves right now, that they are caught in between. They're caught halfway between the world and a monastery. And it's a very awkward and uncomfortable place. Try to make it as good as you can. I would say it's not advisable to try to behave completely like a monk or a nun in lay life, but at the same time to maximize the supportive environment for, if you're in the lay life, try to maximize your environment for support for that. And that sometimes means being rather choosy about where you live and who you live with, because others are not interested in a contemplative life, a refined life, and they will break in upon your peace and well-being. And so sometimes you have to make difficult choices about the environment which you prefer to live in. And so this is a great problem. I've been trying to solve this for people for decades now, and we have a kind of an extended monastery retreat center commune almost that works like that helps people find at least a middle ground, a quasi-monastic kind of middle ground. And that's what this word upasaka means, that one who comes close to the monks, who is in close association and practices. It's like a third order of Dhamma practitioners. So, try to maximize the possibilities for yourself. Yeah.
Our next question is also from the live chat, from Kathy in Crown Point, Indiana, United States. Is it okay to believe in the heaven realms, or does Buddhism drop that concept?
Well, this is quite often the information when people come to Buddhism. I think it was a strategy. It probably came out of some of the early Buddhist teachers who were talking in the West to people who were Christians. And in Christianity, heaven is everything. And in Buddhism, heaven is not the final goal. And so quite often people would understand that as, in Buddhism, there's no heaven, no hell, and there's only nirvana. And this is incorrect. In fact, I would say, I probably could give at least an hour talk on this. I would say that the concept of heaven and the detailed concepts of not only heaven, but heavens, like substantially complex levels of different being, consciousness and being in these heavens, has its roots in India, has its roots even pre-Buddhist ideas of these heavens, and has very little correspondence in Judeo-Christianity. There are virtually no descriptions of heaven in Judaism, and the early texts of Christianity have virtually no descriptions of heaven. Jesus seems to mention it, but it appears if you look at just the early texts, it's some sort of period of time of where you're brought back to life on the earth. That the heaven was kind of a basic idea of the Garden of Eden again. And it's only later in Christian history that the ideas of heaven develop. And it's very interesting to try to find out where they got these ideas of heaven from. And it may indeed be from Buddhist texts, because they're described in such detail in Buddhist texts. There's over 30 levels of consciousness and being in the Dhamma texts, and gone into in great just detail. By the way, so if you want some more detailed information about this, we have gone to a great deal of trouble making 10 talks on Buddhist cosmology. It's on the YouTube channel. There you will find me talking with Ajahn Punadamo, and heavily illustrated as well, to introduce people to the fact that Buddhism has very sophisticated, detailed visions of these other realms. What is different, though, is they're not eternal. They're more just, they're transient realms. So if you get to heaven is kind of a booby prize, like if you don't make it to, if you don't attain Nibbana, well, maybe you get the booby prize of heaven. But it's not an eternal kind of condition. It's got a problem with it. It ends, and who knows what comes after the end of that. The problems persist. So yes, there are very clear descriptions of heaven, but it is inseparable from consciousness. So it's you don't just get plucked up into a place. You can imagine. Think about this as taking a dog to an art gallery. What does the dog experience in an art gallery? Does the dog experience art? No, the dog experiences some interesting smells. And so a person who hasn't got a developed consciousness doesn't end up in a refined existence, because you experience existence through your consciousness. So it's more or less heavenly consciousness. And they call this the Brahma Viharas, that you enter the dwellings of the gods through consciousness, and the consciousness has to be refined through beautiful emotions like loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And these are the essence of heaven. And the mere physical elements of it, the sights and sounds and smells and tastes and touches of it, are secondary to the emotional appreciation. So this is the Buddhist idea of heaven is attained through refinement of consciousness, not by external salvation or by grace through the grace of God or anything like this. It's by your own refinement of consciousness. So that's a little bit about heaven.
Our next question is also from the live chat from Edit. Should we educate ourselves about the different types of Buddhism?
Well, depending on who you are, not everybody is capable of wading through these volumes of religious comparative scholarship. It's just immense. But you can get some brief sketches of the differences. And in the Buddhist schools, and one should not, so if you're a Westerner, it's quite likely that you will just think, oh, there's something called Buddhism, but or the Buddhist religion, but it's really Buddhist religions with an S on the end. There are a number of different Buddhist schools that are substantially different from each other. And you should understand that they are different to begin with. And that would be the beginning of it. But to And then you can find summaries of what it is, what the essential teachings of each school are. And then you will have to work at it from there. I had to wade through this myself, and of course there's much more literature and possibilities available now, especially through YouTube and places like this, than there were in my early days. And so this is start with very brief basics to understand the difference in the schools. And also understand that some of the schools tend to spin their advantages. Beware of advertising in the schools as well. Yeah. Okay, next question.
Ajahn, our next question is from the live feed from J. Lyles. How can one deal skillfully with people who are curious about Buddhism but disrespectful and insulting towards the Buddha and his disciples, i.e., as if possessed by Mara?
Yeah, a good something very important about the Buddhist approach to this, and the Buddha clearly talked to his monks about this. He said, when people insult me or the Dhamma or anything like this, monks, you should not react in a negative way. You should ask yourself, well, do they speak in accordance? Do they have anything true to say? If they have something true to say, then you should learn from that. And if they have nothing true to say, then you set it aside because they're just wrong. But the essence of the Buddhist teaching is detachment from, so you're not available for being angry or disappointed because somebody else doesn't appreciate the Buddha. So this is actually a very good opportunity to practice. In Buddhism, there is no kind of, violent reaction to heresy or negative criticism of the Buddha. There's no violent sort of resort to violence if somebody insults the Buddha. You'll see this if you go to a garden shop in the Home Depot. You're going to see all kinds of garden Buddhas, right? Concrete Buddhas there. They can sell them in a garden shop. You don't see any garden Mohammeds, do you? So it's very dangerous to be representing or insulting Muhammad, but it's not dangerous to insult the Buddha. The Buddha is completely non-reactive. You also saw that this recent, a few years ago, in Afghanistan, which used to be a Buddhist country, some of the biggest stone Buddhas in the world were carved into the cliffs there. And the Taliban took to shattering them with artillery shells because they're not into imagery. They don't like images, especially non-Islamic images. So they felt it was justified to destroy them. And a lot of the world was upset about this. And of course, Buddhists didn't appreciate them being shattered, but our reaction was, well, that's how they feel about it. It's just stone. I mean, yes, it's an insult to Buddhists, but the Buddha himself said, just don't be insulted. People have opinions about this and about that. Don't make a problem of it. You're free in the midst of everybody else's lack of respect and so forth. And that's the only true freedom you'll ever have, is that can you be free in the midst of everybody not agreeing with you or not praising your beliefs, etc. This is why it's a very refined kind of practice, and it's very similar to some of the Greek philosophers who in the midst of being insulted and so forth had no reaction and no problem with that. To be equanimous in the midst of this is very liberating. Okay.
Our next question is from the live feed from Garrett in California, United States. Venerable Ajahn Sona, thank you for your talks. Does the Buddha have practices for building faith such as repeating the three jewels?
Yes, faith is an important element of Dhamma, and it's a faculty which should be developed. And quite often you'll get misinformation about the idea that there is no faith requirement in Buddhism. It's just strictly analytical knowledge. But faith helps. If trusting helps, but it's not unwise or foolish or impulsive faith. So faith without wisdom is like running in the dark. So it has to be a kind of a reasoned conviction is what it is. So you read over the ideas of the Buddha, and these are things that you can see yourself. So the Four Noble Truths are something that are visible, at least to your intellect. And once you go over these ideas and you see that, yeah, it refers to how I operate in the world, it is, I do suffer from these situations, and I do suffer because I forget that everything is impermanent, etc. I'm disappointed, I respond somewhat irrationally to the world. So this is the source of my suffering. It's my response to the world. It is the source of my suffering. So this is a way of developing faith in the procedure, an initial faith. And as you read the Buddha, especially the suttas by the Buddha himself, they're so clear and confident that you quite often, it's very convincing. So you can get some confidence from that. By repeating the three jewels and looking at Buddha images, I would say for a Westerner, it may be futile. If you're born and raised in that culture and it's around you and everybody seems to be completely confident in the Buddha, then it has a very strong effect on you. The Buddha images and the three jewels and so forth have a strong, but if you're coming from a non-Buddhist culture, you're going to have to access that through readings and ideas and meeting with people who inspire you, perhaps monks, nuns, and Buddhist lay people who respond to the world in a good-hearted way without being swept away into distress, chaos, and suffering. So that can be the source of your growing faith in the authenticity of the Dhamma. So those are just some ideas for developing that. Okay, I think we have time for another question.
Mm-hmm. Ajahn, our final question today is from the live feed from Nixon in Singapore. In some meditation styles, one goes very deep into jhana before exiting for vipassana, especially the nimitta styles. Does this fulfill, quote, samatha preceding vipassana, or is this miccha samadhi?
Yes. I think I recall from last week a similar kind of question. Samatha is deep cultivation of concentration, and it's purification of the mind. It's so that you can pay attention and you can lucidly see and understand things without emotional impediments getting in the way. So they talk about the mind, the purpose of samadhi as being making the mind malleable and wieldy. And so it's like taking clay that you're going to make into a vase or into a bowl, and it's a solid block, but you've got to add some moisture and you have to work it, have to get it to the right temperature so that it can be shaped into the shape that you wish it to go to. And then you've got to spin it on a lathe and all this kind of stuff to make it this way. So the mind, why it can't grasp these higher ideas, this new thing, is because it's not being worked properly. And so it's only in your most lucid and present moments that you make breakthroughs in understanding. And you'll see this with people describing having new visions of a path in their life. Like they decide to go off and pursue another lifestyle. By the way, this is happening almost worldwide during this pandemic because people are not going to their regular work, and they have time and more or less a relaxed environment, and they start thinking, I don't want to go back to that work. It was too busy, too demeaning, wasn't paid enough. It was not what I want to do. And because they've had some time to be peaceful and at home, they start to get a new vision of their life. So this is what samadhi is that before you try to find your way out of the forest, this is the Boy Scout manual, if you get lost in the forest, what's the first thing you should do? Sit down and calm down. Don't make a move until you're calm, because otherwise you'll get more lost. So this is samadhi. So calm the mind, deepen the stillness of the mind, and then bring up the situation of life as described in the Four Noble Truths, and then you're much more likely to have a breakthrough to an insight. You're likely to have that. So that samatha and vipassana, or clear seeing, are very good friends. And samatha precedes that, frequently precedes that. So I think we have come to the end of our time, but I would like to turn over this to Pia to describe our upcoming retreat. So Pia, take it away.
Thank you, Ajahn Sona. As Ajahn mentioned last week, we will be having a virtual retreat from December 26th to January 1st. And the title of that is The Highest Blessings. It'll be based on the Mangala Sutta. Everyone's welcome to attend. I am now posting a link to the website on a web page on our website where you can find more information. Everyone can join in. You just join us here on the YouTube channel. You can register in advance if you like, but that isn't necessary. And again, all the details will be found in the link I've posted, and that'll also be on the description for this this live stream. So we look forward to all of you joining us next week as well. Thank you.